It was one of those cold winter evenings where the sky seemed heavier than usual, and the wind cut through every layer of clothing. Snow had been falling steadily all day, turning the roads into slippery white ribbons. People had mostly stayed home, avoiding the storm, but she had an errand that couldn't wait. She had promised herself she would be careful, drive slowly, and get back safely before the storm got worse. She had been driving for a while, her headlights barely illuminating the thick veil of falling snow. The car wipers swished back and forth tirelessly, but visibility was still almost zero. Every mile seemed to stretch endlessly, and the silence of the snowy landscape was only broken by the faint roar of the engine and the crunch of tires on ice. She felt a mix of worry and determination. Winter storms were unpredictable, and she knew one wrong step could lead to serious trouble. Suddenly, through the swirling snow, she saw something that made her heart race. On the side of the road, there was a young woman struggling to move forward, her small figure almost swallowed by the snow. In her arms, she was carrying a baby wrapped in what looked like a thin blanket, not nearly enough for the cold. The baby's small cries were muffled by the wind, but she could hear the urgency in them. The mother seemed exhausted, shivering, and clearly desperate. Her car must have broken down, she realized, or perhaps had slid off the icy road. Without thinking twice, she pulled the car over and stepped out, her boots sinking into the snow with each step. The cold hit her immediately, but it didn't matter. She was focused entirely on reaching them safely. As she approached, the mother's eyes met hers, wide with fear but also relief. She didn't know who this stranger was, but she knew help had arrived. "Are you okay? Can I help you?" she asked, her voice calm but filled with concern. The mother nodded quickly, her teeth chattering. "My car, it's stuck." I can't get anywhere, my baby. He's so cold." She could see the baby's tiny face peeking out of the blanket, red from the cold, eyes blinking slowly. Her heart tightened. She gently took the baby in her arms, checking to make sure he was warm and breathing normally. "It's okay. You're safe now. We'll get through this," she reassured them both. The mother tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat and she simply nodded, tears freezing slightly on her cheeks. The storm had made everything harder. Moving even a few steps through the thick snow was exhausting. She could see the young mother was barely keeping herself upright, leaning heavily on the car for support. She helped them both into her car, making sure the baby was tucked securely in a warm seat. The mother climbed in carefully, still trembling, and she handed her a thick blanket she kept in the trunk for emergencies. "Wrap yourself in him tightly. We'll get to somewhere warm." Driving through the storm was nerve-wracking. The snow was relentless and the road barely visible. Each curve brought a fresh wave of fear. One slip could send the car sliding into the ditch. She drove slowly, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, her eyes scanning the road every second. The mother held the baby close, rocking him gently to calm him, whispering words she could barely hear over the wind. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as they moved forward. The storm was unrelenting, and at one point she almost lost sight of the road entirely. Her mind raced with every possible scenario, but she refused to let panic take over. She knew that staying calm was the only way they would get through this safely. The mother spoke occasionally, her voice small and shaky. She explained that she had been visiting her sister and was on her way home when the car slipped on the icy road. I thought I would be fine," she said quietly, tears mixing with the snow on her cheeks. "But guess I couldn't move the car. I didn't know what to do." She nodded, understanding exactly how terrifying that must have been. "You did the right thing by coming out. You didn't give up, and that's what matters. Now we're getting you both somewhere safe." As they drove, she couldn't help but notice the baby's tiny fingers curling around the blanket, little breaths fogging up the cold air from his tiny nose. She whispered softly to him, hoping to comfort him without startling him further. The mother smiled weakly, grateful that someone had appeared when it seemed all hope was lost. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, she saw the faint glow of lights ahead. A small cabin sat near the road, its windows warm and inviting against the storm outside. She pulled into the driveway carefully, the tires crunching against the packed snow. The cabin door opened and a kind-faced woman stepped out, surprised to see anyone brave enough to venture through the storm. "This is perfect," she said, relief flooding her voice. She helped the young mother and the baby out of the car and into the warmth of the cabin. The mother's knees wobbled from exhaustion, but she held the baby tightly, who now seemed to calm down slightly in the warmth. They were safe for the moment. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and warmth. Blankets were handed over, hot drinks offered, and the baby was checked carefully by someone who had medical training. The young mother sat quietly, tears of relief streaming down her face. She couldn't believe a stranger had stopped to help them, had risked herself in the storm just to make sure they survived. The woman smiled softly, brushing snowflakes from her coat. "You don't have to thank me. Everyone deserves a little help sometimes. I couldn't just drive by and leave you out there." The young mother looked at her with awe, overwhelmed by the kindness she had encountered. I don't know how to thank you. You saved my baby and me. I don't even know your name." "It doesn't matter," she said, smiling. "Just promise me you'll take care of yourselves and maybe one day pass it on. That's the real thanks." They stayed at the cabin for a while, letting the storm pass outside. Each minute felt like a gift, a small miracle in the middle of a dangerous night. Slowly, the mother began to regain her strength, rocking her baby gently, whispering soft words of comfort. She was alive. Her child was alive. And someone had stepped in when it mattered most. The woman knew that the night wasn't over yet. Roads were still treacherous, and she had to get herself home eventually. But for now, she could rest knowing they were safe. The storm outside raged on, but inside that small cabin, warmth and kindness had taken root. By the time the snowstorm began to lighten, the young mother and her baby were smiling faintly, feeling a little safer in the world. The bond that had formed in that moment between a stranger and a family in need was something neither of them would forget. It was a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, human kindness could shine brighter than any storm. As she prepared to leave, the young mother held her hand tightly. "I will never forget you," she said, her voice trembling. "You saved our lives." "You'll do the same for someone else one day," she replied, smiling warmly. "That's how the world keeps moving forward." And with that, she stepped back into the snow, carefully making her way home. The storm had been fierce, but so had their courage and compassion. And though the night was long and cold, a simple act of kindness had made all the difference in the world. After the storm had passed, the young mother and her baby were finally beginning to recover from the long, frightening night. The small cabin still smelled faintly of smoke from the fire, and the warmth that filled the room was comforting, almost like a shield against the memory of the snowstorm. She watched her baby sleep in the blanket, tiny hands curling slightly with each breath, and for the first time that night, she allowed herself to breathe a little easier. The woman who had rescued them sat quietly nearby, sipping a hot cup of tea. She watched the young mother carefully, noticing the exhaustion etched in her face. The young mother's hands were rough and red from the cold, and her clothes were still damp from the snow. Even in safety, the events of the night lingered in her eyes, a mixture of fear, relief, and gratitude that was hard to put into words. "You both look much warmer now," she said softly. "But I know that doesn't erase what happened out there. It's normal to feel shaken." The young mother nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the baby. I don't understand how someone like you could stop and help. So many people would have just kept driving, but you saved us." Her voice cracked slightly, and she blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. "I didn't do anything special," the woman replied. "I just couldn't leave you there. You didn't have a choice, and neither did your baby. Sometimes it's enough to just be there when someone needs help." For a long moment they sat in silence. Outside, the world was still white, the aftermath of the storm painting the landscape in a blanket of snow. Inside, though, it was quiet, warm, and safe. A small bubble of comfort in a night that had been anything but. The baby stirred, and the young mother instinctively leaned over, rocking him gently. The woman smiled quietly, watching the tender moment. Even in the midst of chaos, there were these small, perfect slices of humanity that reminded her why she kept helping others. After a while, the young mother spoke again. "I don't even know where to go from here. My car is gone, and I don't have family close by. I don't know what to do." The woman's heart went out to her. She knew that the rescue was only the first step. The night had ended, but there were still practical challenges ahead, places to stay, transportation, and the constant worry that came with caring for a newborn in winter. "We'll figure it out," she said firmly. "You're not alone. Let's make a plan so you can get back on your feet safely." Together, they began discussing options. The cabin's owner was kind and offered them a room for the night, and even promised to help them contact someone who could provide transportation once the snow cleared. They arranged for food and supplies, making sure the baby had enough blankets, clothes, and nourishment. The young mother's eyes brightened slightly as she realized she wasn't completely alone in this fight against the storm and the challenges it had created. The woman stayed with them for a while longer, helping with the baby, offering advice on keeping him warm and fed, and simply listening. She knew that sometimes just being present and attentive could make all the difference. The mother confided small fears about being alone, about the baby's health, about what would happen if another storm came. The woman listened without judgment, offering gentle words of reassurance. "You're stronger than you think," she said quietly. "You survived this storm. You've been through one of the hardest nights anyone could face with a newborn, and you're still here. That strength is inside you, even if it doesn't feel like it right now." The young mother smiled faintly, the first real smile since the rescue. I guess I didn't think of it that way. I just felt like I was failing. Like I should have been able to handle everything myself." "You're not failing," the woman replied. "You did everything you could. The storm was bigger than any one person. You didn't give up, and that's what matters." They spent the evening talking quietly, sharing stories about small joys and difficulties of life. The woman learned that the mother had recently moved to the area for work, far from family and friends. She had been trying to make a life for herself and her baby, but the isolation sometimes made even simple tasks feel impossible. The rescue had not only saved their lives physically, but also reminded the young mother that there were people willing to help her emotionally, too. As the night deepened, the storm outside seemed to fade, leaving a silent, frozen world in its wake. They prepared the baby for bed, wrapping him tightly and placing him in a safe spot nearby where both women could watch him. The young mother finally relaxed, sinking into a chair with a sigh of relief. Her body trembled slightly from the cold and exhaustion, but her spirit felt a little lighter. "You know," she said after a pause, "I don't think I could have made it through without you. I'm not sure I would have survived the night." "You did survive," the woman said gently. "And now we just focus on the next steps. Tonight is over, and tomorrow is a new day." Morning came slowly, with soft light filtering through the frosted windows. The young mother woke first, checking on her baby and making sure he was warm and safe. The woman had already been awake for a while, gathering supplies and preparing a simple breakfast. The storm had passed completely, leaving a sparkling white landscape outside. The roads were still tricky, but the world seemed quieter, almost peaceful after the chaos of the night before. Over breakfast, they discussed plans to get the young mother back to her home safely. The woman helped arrange for a tow truck to retrieve the car and for transportation back to the nearest town. She also gave practical advice about traveling in winter with a baby, emphasizing safety and preparation. The mother listened carefully, absorbing every piece of guidance, grateful for someone with experience looking out for her and her child. Before they left the cabin, the young mother paused and turned to the woman. "I know I've said thank you, but I don't think words can really show how grateful I am. You didn't just save my baby and me. You reminded me that there are still good people in the world." The woman smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the cabin's fire. "That's all I wanted. Just remember what you learned tonight. Kindness matters. Even small acts can change everything." They hugged briefly, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had formed through a shared struggle. It was more than just a rescue. It was a connection between two strangers that life had brought together for a reason. As they stepped out into the sparkling snow, the world felt different, somehow brighter, even in the cold. The journey back was slow, careful, but steady. The mother held her baby close, occasionally glancing at the woman who had helped them, silently thanking her again. They talked lightly to pass the time, sharing small stories and laughter, the tension from the previous night slowly easing. By the time they reached the edge of town, the young mother felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. Even after they parted ways, the memory of that night remained with both women. The young mother knew she would never forget the kindness of a stranger who risked the storm to save her and her child. And the woman, though she would often shrug off the hero label, carried the memory of the baby's tiny fingers and the mother's relieved eyes, a reminder that courage and compassion could make a real difference in someone's life. That day marked the beginning of something new. It wasn't just about surviving the snowstorm. It was about discovering resilience, connection, and the quiet power of human kindness. The storm had tested them, challenged them, but it had also shown that even in the harshest conditions, hope could shine through, guided by compassion and care. And so they moved forward, changed by a night that neither would ever forget. The mother with her baby felt safer, stronger, and more connected to the world around her. The woman returned home carrying a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her small choice to stop, to help, to care, had rippled into something far greater than she could have imagined. The snow had stopped. The roads were clearing and the world looked peaceful, but the impact of that night remained. It was more than a story of survival. It was a story of humanity, bravery, and the bonds that form when people choose to help one another, even in the most unexpected moments. After the storm had passed and the young mother and her baby were safe, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The rescue had been a turning point, not only for their immediate safety but also for the way they began to see the world. The young mother often reflected on the night she almost lost hope, remembering the stranger who had risked herself in a freezing storm just to help them. The memory was vivid, the warmth of the car, the gentle reassurance, the feeling of safety after hours of fear. Days after the incident, she found herself thinking about more than just surviving. She thought about the kindness of strangers, the way a single act of courage could change lives and how fragile life could be. She realized that even though she had felt helpless during the storm, she still had strength within her that she hadn't fully recognized. Caring for her baby in such harsh conditions had tested her in ways she had never imagined, and surviving had given her a new sense of resilience. The woman who had rescued them stayed in touch, checking in to make sure the baby was healthy and that the mother was adjusting. Their conversations were more than just updates. They were moments of support, encouragement, and shared reflection. The young mother felt a deep sense of gratitude for this connection. In a world where people were often too busy to notice others in need, this one person had stopped everything to help her. That realization brought tears to her eyes more than once, and she felt determined to honor that kindness in her own life. With the snow gone, the young mother returned to her small apartment, carefully carrying her baby and unpacking the warm clothes and blankets that had been provided during the rescue. She realized how much she had taken for granted, how easy it was to forget the dangers of winter when life seemed ordinary. But now each layer of warmth, each safe step outside, reminded her of the fragility of life and the importance of preparation, awareness, and community. The baby began to recover from the exposure to cold and stress. His small hands and cheeks regained their natural warmth, and his cries became less frequent, replaced with the gentle coos and giggles of a healthy child. The young mother watched him closely, feeling a profound love mixed with a sense of responsibility she had never fully understood until that night. Every small smile, every soft breath reminded her that life was precious and that she was capable of protecting it. She began to share the story of the rescue with close friends and family. At first, she struggled to put it into words. How could she describe a night of fear, desperation, and sudden relief? But as she spoke, she realized how important it was to tell others about what had happened. It wasn't just a story of survival. It was a story of humanity, courage, and the power of helping others without expecting anything in return. Each time she recounted the events, she felt her gratitude grow, and she hoped that others could be inspired by the actions of the woman who had saved them. The young mother also noticed changes within herself. She felt more aware of the struggles of others, more willing to offer help in small ways, and more confident in her ability to handle challenges. The storm had tested her limits, but it had also shown her that even in the worst situations there was hope. She began to make small changes in her daily life, preparing emergency kits, checking on neighbors, and being more attentive to her surroundings. It was as if the rescue had opened her eyes to a new way of living, one where kindness and vigilance were intertwined. The woman who had helped them became more than just a rescuer. She became a mentor and a friend. They met occasionally, often sharing coffee or a meal and talking about life, challenges, and dreams. Their bond grew stronger, rooted in a shared experience that neither would ever forget. The young mother found comfort in knowing that someone who had risked everything to help her was now part of her life, offering guidance and encouragement when she needed it most. One day, the young mother decided to take a small step toward giving back. She joined a local community group that focused on helping families during harsh winters. She shared her story openly, explaining how a single act of kindness had changed her life and saved her child. Her words resonated with others, and soon she was volunteering, helping families who faced similar struggles, offering warm clothing, blankets, and emotional support. Each time she assisted someone, she remembered the woman who had saved her, and felt that she was paying forward the kindness that had been shown to her. The baby, now healthier and more active, became a source of joy not only for the mother but also for the people around them. Visitors to the apartment often commented on his bright eyes and cheerful demeanor, unaware of the life-threatening situation he had survived. For the young mother, each smile was a reminder of the night they had endured and the courage it had taken to survive. She held him close at night, whispering promises of protection and love, knowing that the bond between them was unbreakable. Life gradually regained a sense of normalcy, but the experience had left an indelible mark. The young mother became more mindful of the world around her, noticing small acts of kindness and recognizing opportunities to help others. She carried herself with a newfound strength, quietly confident in her ability to navigate challenges, knowing that if she could survive that storm, she could survive almost anything. The woman who had rescued them continued to inspire the young mother in subtle ways. Her actions had shown that courage didn't always involve grand gestures. It could be as simple as stopping to help someone in need, offering warmth, or lending an ear. The young mother often reflected on how much impact a single person could have on another's life. She felt a sense of responsibility to honor that example, to live in a way that amplified the goodness she had received. Over time, their story began to spread beyond their immediate circle. Friends shared it, neighbors talked about it, and eventually a small local news outlet picked up the story. People were drawn to the tale of survival, courage, and unexpected friendship. The young mother was hesitant at first, unsure if she wanted to relive the frightening night, but she realized that sharing it could help others understand the importance of kindness, preparedness, and compassion. The story was written with care, emphasizing the humanity and bravery involved rather than dramatizing the danger. The article led to more opportunities to connect with the community. The young mother participated in local events focused on family safety and winter preparedness, using her story to encourage others to be vigilant and supportive of those in need. She found that the act of sharing her experience gave her a sense of purpose, transforming a night of fear into a lifetime of meaningful lessons. Meanwhile, the bond between the mother and the woman who had rescued them grew stronger with each passing day. They supported each other in practical ways, sharing advice about parenting, checking in on each other's well-being, and celebrating small milestones. The connection had started as a spontaneous act of courage, but it had developed into a lasting friendship built on trust, respect, and shared experience. The young mother also noticed a change in how she approached challenges. She was no longer overwhelmed by obstacles, whether they were related to work, parenting, or daily life. The storm had taught her patience, resilience, and the importance of seeking help when needed. She felt a quiet confidence that came from knowing she had survived one of the most dangerous nights of her life and had come out stronger on the other side. At home, she created a small corner of safety and warmth for her baby, ensuring that he had everything he needed to grow and thrive. The blankets, clothes, and supplies that had been provided during the rescue were now part of a larger effort to maintain security and comfort for her family. Every careful preparation, every thoughtful arrangement, was a reminder of the night that had changed their lives and the woman whose courage had made it all possible. Even months later, the memory of the storm remained vivid. The young mother often reflected on the fear, the uncertainty, and the sudden relief of finding help when she needed it most. Those memories were not just reminders of danger, they were lessons in human connection, courage, and the quiet power of compassion. She shared them with her baby in small ways, through stories, songs, and gentle touches, hoping that he would grow up understanding the value of kindness and empathy. Through all of this, the young mother realized that life had given her more than just survival. It had given her perspective, relationships, and the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others. The snowstorm had tested her limits, but it had also shown her that she could rely on others, draw strength from unexpected places, and transform fear into purpose. The woman who had rescued them remained a constant presence, a reminder that one person's courage could ripple outward, touching countless lives in ways that could never be fully measured. The young mother often thought about how their paths had crossed so suddenly, so unexpectedly, and how that single night had set in motion a series of changes that would shape her life forever. In the end, the young mother and her baby were not just survivors. They were witnesses to the best of humanity. The storm had been harsh, terrifying, and exhausting, but it had also brought warmth, hope, and connection. Every day after that, the young mother carried the lessons she had learned: to be prepared, to be courageous, and above all, to be kind. These lessons would guide her in raising her child and in living a life that honored the stranger who had saved them both. And though the storm was long over, its impact remained. It had transformed fear into gratitude, desperation into connection, and danger into opportunity. It had shown that even in the coldest, harshest moments there was light, and that light often came from the courage and kindness of another human being. Life after the snowstorm slowly began to settle into a new routine, but the young mother could feel that something had changed within her. The fear and uncertainty of that night had left an imprint, and the act of being rescued had created a bond that she could not forget. She often thought about the woman who had stopped to help her and her baby, and she realized that this bond was more than a fleeting connection. It had become a source of inspiration, guidance, and comfort. The woman who had rescued them continued to stay in touch, sending messages to check on the mother and the baby. Sometimes she would call, other times she would drop by with small gifts: warm clothes for the baby, a few groceries, or even a book for the mother. Each gesture, though simple, reminded the young mother that kindness could be consistent, quiet, and powerful. She had always known that good people existed, but experiencing it firsthand had shifted something deep inside her. The young mother also began to notice how the story of the snowstorm had spread. Friends and neighbors had shared the tale, and it slowly reached people outside her immediate circle. Local residents spoke about the bravery of the woman who had helped, and more importantly, they spoke about the importance of stopping to help others in need. It was a reminder that one small action could create a ripple effect, changing lives far beyond the immediate moment. This realization inspired the young mother to take small steps to make a difference herself. She started volunteering at a community center that helped families in difficult situations. She shared her story openly, explaining how a single act of kindness had changed the course of her life and her baby's life. Each time she spoke, she could see the impact it had on others. The way parents listened intently, the way volunteers felt inspired to act, and the way the community became more connected through shared compassion. The young mother also began thinking more deeply about the concept of support. Before the storm, she had believed that she had to manage everything on her own. But after experiencing the rescue, she realized that asking for help was not a weakness. It was a recognition of human interdependence. She started reaching out to other parents, offering guidance, support, and encouragement. Her own experience became a tool to help others navigate the challenges of parenthood and daily life, especially in difficult circumstances. The bond between the mother and the woman who rescued them grew stronger over time. They would meet regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for walks, and sometimes simply to sit and talk. The conversations were never rushed, and they often drifted from practical advice to shared stories of life, challenges, and hope. The young mother began to see the woman not just as a rescuer, but as a mentor, a guide, and a friend. She valued the wisdom and calm presence that had once helped her through a terrifying night. The baby, now a little older, became a small bridge between the two women. The rescuer would play with him gently, cooing and laughing, helping him grow in a safe and loving environment. Watching the baby thrive brought immense joy to both women. For the young mother, it was a sign that life could continue with beauty and happiness even after a night of fear. For the rescuer, it was a reminder that small acts of courage could blossom into lasting bonds and tangible outcomes. The community also began to take notice. People in the neighborhood started organizing small initiatives to help families during harsh winters, collecting blankets, warm clothing, and emergency supplies. The young mother became actively involved, not only sharing her story but also helping to coordinate efforts, making sure that others would not have to face the same danger alone. She realized that the snowstorm, terrifying as it had been, had given her a new sense of purpose, a mission to help others with compassion and preparedness. Over time, local media picked up on the story of the rescue and the ripple effect it had created. Articles highlighted not just the bravery of the rescuer, but also the transformation of the young mother and the community initiatives that followed. The coverage was careful to focus on human courage, kindness, and connection, rather than dramatizing the danger of the storm. The young mother and the rescuer both understood that the story was bigger than them. It was about inspiring others to act, to help, and to recognize the importance of human connection in moments of crisis. This public recognition had an unexpected effect. People began to approach the young mother, asking questions about parenting, safety, and preparedness. She answered with honesty, often sharing her experiences and lessons learned during the storm. Each conversation became an opportunity to remind others that survival was not just about luck. It was about courage, preparedness, and the willingness to act for the sake of others. The young mother also began to document her journey. She wrote small notes about her experiences, reflecting on her fears, her gratitude, and the moments that had shaped her life. Writing became a way to process the emotions she had carried since that night, and it also became a tool to share her story more effectively with others. She wanted people to understand that even ordinary individuals could make extraordinary differences through acts of kindness, courage, and persistence. The rescuer continued to guide her, offering advice and encouragement when needed. They spoke about the importance of community, the value of empathy, and the quiet strength that comes from helping others. The young mother found herself absorbing these lessons, using them not just in her volunteer work, but in her daily life as a parent and a neighbor. She began to notice small opportunities to help, assisting a neighbor with groceries, checking on families during the cold nights, or offering advice to new parents who seemed overwhelmed. Each act, however small, was a continuation of the kindness that had saved her and her baby. As months passed, the young mother's life began to change in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her confidence grew, her perspective shifted, and her relationship strengthened. The storm, once a terrifying memory, had become a symbol of resilience and transformation. She realized that danger and fear often reveal the hidden strength in people and the power of community, when individuals choose to care for one another. The baby, now more active and playful, seemed to carry the warmth and security he had gained during that first rescue. Watching him grow, laugh, and explore the world safely gave the young mother a sense of accomplishment and joy that was difficult to describe. Every milestone, first steps, first words, first smiles felt like a celebration not just of life, but of the courage and kindness that had brought them through the darkest night. The young mother began sharing her story more broadly, not just through volunteer work, but also in local schools and community gatherings. She spoke to parents, children, and community members about the importance of kindness, empathy, and preparedness. Her story inspired others to act, creating a network of people who were ready to help in emergencies, look out for each other, and foster a culture of support and compassion. Even in her personal life, she noticed small changes. She felt more connected to her neighbors, more confident in her decisions, and more aware of the needs of those around her. The storm had taught her that life could change in an instant, and that human connection was often the most powerful tool to navigate those changes. She carried that lesson in every interaction, whether it was a kind word to a stranger or practical help to a family in need. Through it all, the rescuer remained a constant presence, not just as a guide, but as a friend and confidant. They celebrated milestones together, from birthdays to small achievements, and they reflected on the journey that had begun on a freezing night during a dangerous snowstorm. The bond they shared was a testament to the transformative power of compassion and the lasting impact that one act of courage could have on multiple lives. The young mother often thought about how fragile life could be and how a single moment could change everything. She understood now that fear and danger were part of life, but so were hope, courage, and connection. The night of the snowstorm had been terrifying, but it had also been a catalyst for growth, resilience, and meaningful relationships. It had shown her the importance of being prepared, the power of community, and the enduring impact of kindness. Through her volunteer work, her writing, and her daily interactions, she continued to honor the woman who had rescued her and her baby. She knew that every act of kindness she performed was a way of paying forward the life-changing help she had received. And in doing so, she realized that the story of the snowstorm was not just about survival. It was about transformation, inspiration, and the incredible difference one person could make in the lives of others. The storm was long gone, and life had returned to a sense of normalcy, but the impact remained. The young mother, her baby, and the woman who had rescued them had all been changed forever. They had learned lessons that could not be forgotten, that courage is not the absence of fear, that kindness has the power to save lives, and that human connection is often the most vital force in overcoming challenges. Even years later, the young mother would remember that winter night vividly, the fear, the uncertainty, the relief, and the warmth of human kindness. She would reflect on how that single act of bravery had sparked a chain of events that transformed her life, her child's life, and the lives of many others around her. It was a reminder that life is fragile, but also full of opportunities to create meaning, offer help, and leave a lasting impact on the world. And so, the snowstorm became more than a memory of danger. It became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the incredible power of compassion. The young mother, her baby, and the woman who had rescued them had all been changed forever, and their story continued to inspire others to act with courage and kindness. No matter the circumstances, the months following the snowstorm were filled with change, growth, and new beginnings. The young mother had learned to navigate life with a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. The baby, now a little older, was healthy, happy, and full of energy. Every smile, every laugh, every tiny milestone reminded her of the fragile night they had survived and the extraordinary kindness that had made it possible. The woman who had rescued them remained a steady presence in their lives. She visited often, bringing practical help and emotional support. Sometimes it was a warm meal, sometimes advice on parenting, and sometimes just her presence, a reassuring reminder that they were not alone in the world. The young mother had come to depend on this friendship, seeing it as a beacon of stability in a life that had once felt uncertain and precarious. Over time, the young mother realized that her life was no longer about just surviving day to day. She wanted to use her experience to make a difference in the lives of others. Inspired by the courage and kindness she had received, she began volunteering at local community centers, helping other parents who were struggling, especially during harsh winters. She shared her story openly, describing the fear she had felt and the relief that had followed when someone stepped in to help. Her story resonated with many people who admired her resilience and the gratitude she showed for a stranger's act of bravery. She also worked to create small support networks for parents with young children, making sure that no family would feel as alone or unprepared as she had felt during that dangerous night. She encouraged families to have emergency supplies, to stay vigilant during storms, and to seek help when needed. Her story became a source of hope and inspiration, showing that even the smallest gestures, like stopping to help someone in trouble, could create long-lasting change. The baby's presence continued to influence her decisions and her outlook on life. Raising him became not only a responsibility, but a motivation to be better, stronger, and kinder. She thought often about the night they had spent in the storm, how quickly things could have gone wrong, and how one act of compassion had saved their lives. She wanted to ensure that he grew up in a world where people looked out for one another, where kindness was celebrated, and where courage was recognized in its quiet forms. The story of the rescue began to reach a wider audience. Local newspapers and small media outlets covered the event,